Hello,
Hello,
Shub-
Joby.
hello, Shubhra, Khurana. Welcome to the channel Kahanis Golden Bytes. Thank you for taking out your time to be on this channel.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you for inviting me to this platform.
Thank you so much, Shubhra, once again. Uh, Shubhra, for the benefit of our viewers, could you just give a little brief about your background, what you're doing, for the benefit of our viewers, please?
For sure. So, I'm a teacher at present, and
Okay.
if I have to go back a few years, so I would say I started off doing my master's in psychology, and I got picked up by the university campus recruitment. So I started to work in Quadrangle Consulting, which primarily works in the area of human resources. So since my specialization was organizational behavior in masters, I worked in the area of assessment centers, development centers, rural projects, which is like still very close to my heart, and hiring projects for multinational companies. And at that point of time, I always knew that education is something that is still pulling me back. So after a 3 year stint with corporate, semi-corporate, as a consultant, I decided that now I want to get into education. So I took a short break, decided to study for UGC NET. I cleared UGC NET as well, but in the meantime, I got an offer to work with my own school where I had studied for good 13 years. So from there, my journey with schools started, and I started to teach psychology. And unfortunately, fortunately, I would say, schools say that if you're teaching psychology, counseling has to go simultaneously. So I dawned into the role of a counselor as well as a psychology teacher. And then it's been a decade now, been into this role, and I think I love working with children. And and I think this is my calling, and I would love to stay here over the period of time.
Lovely, lovely. That was really nice to hear. So you've, uh, been in the corporate space, and now you've move into the very different sector, uh, the education space, and working with a different kind of people. So Shubhra, if you've also studied a little in your masters about or worked in your working period, worked with rural children also, did you work with
No, not really. I was not working with the rural children, but yes, the farmers.
farmers?
We were working with the farmer community in Maharashtra.
Okay. And now, so you've grown up in a city, you've worked with farmers, and you're back to now in a city working with children. Uh, Shubhra, it brings me, begs a question in terms of, I know the answer is obvious, but even then, the children in a city are different from that of rural areas, right?
Yeah.
So, what is what are some of the unique challenges that a city child faces? And let me be a little more specific here. The girl child. Do girl children in cities face something very unique compared to, say, the boy child, the growing child who's a boy, or 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 is they pretty much the same? Is it similar?
I think the question that you are asking is a question that remains very close to an educator. So, with my experience of working with children since last 10 years, and that too in a metropolitan city, I feel yes, girls do go through some kind of a bias, and there is a stereotype which is attached to their upbringing. Um, in a classroom environment, those interactions don't really stem up unless and until I feel a teacher has a bond with the child and the child confides into something. So, as a counselor, I would feel yes, children would walk up to me, rather, girls would walk up to me and share. Um, their versions or their narrative of violence at home, abuse at home, too much of pressure to perform in academics, or when they feel some kind of a bias because there is a male sibling at home. So there's some kind of a comparison that happens. But I feel this kind of a narrative only evolves if a teacher shares a bond with the child. Otherwise, children don't really come up and share those experiences which are maybe traumatic, maybe difficult to live with. So, as an educator, I feel we need to create create safer spaces in the school so that children can come up and share whatever they are really experiencing. So, in a classroom, we can only have a dialogue or initiate a conversation around violence, gender bias, gender sensitivity for that matter. But children will not come up unless and until we show that we are going to have a deeper stomach and whatever that you share is not going to go anywhere. So, that has been my experience.
Some of the women leaders who are very successful today, even on this channel, something that has come out is that the childhood has played a very important role in their homes. Uh, the successful woman leader, I'm just since you're on the women leader, they always speak about their childhood and their home environment being very, very, positive in terms of being, that kind of influence. And what you're saying, it just seems to tie in with that. And uh, how do you have any views in terms of, you obviously just work in a particular school. Uh, do you have any thoughts in terms of from a larger perspective across schools or across, I'm not even talking about university, but just across different, education institutes? Can some structure be created where, the girl child can bring up certain things like this as a default? Where does the involvement, how can this happen? Is it the principal, is it the management, should the government get involved? What are your views? How can some of this take a meaningful step ahead, Shubhra?
Mm.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
I feel that at least the dialogue in the community or in the society has started, wherein we want an equal representation of women, we want to empower women, but there's still a lot of gap that has to be bridged. And I feel it has to be multi-sectoral. It cannot just be limited to school. It has to
Yes.
be done by the government. It has to be done by NGOs. And I think even the private sector has to step in to really bridge this kind of an attitudinal gap. So those are my thoughts around this.
And thank you for that, Shubhra. And Shubhra, one of the things that has also, comes out in surveys and, there are lots of organizations that do various kinds of surveys, and, you'll be aware of many of them. One of the things that comes up is that, in the workspace, and I'm talking about the workspace for just a moment and stepping out of schools, is that women who form in sectors, there are some sectors which have a larger workforce of women.
Yeah.
And uh, even in those sectors, the women are considered competent, equally competent. Gender has no role to play, in competence. So the women workforce are competent, they're very effective. However, the leaders are less amongst the women. Now, there are various factors to it. But one of the things that stems up from some of the surveys related to that kind of, environment of a younger age is they're confident, but they're afraid to lead. They're afraid to lead. You know, they would rather not put up their hand, except for the exceptions to that rule. I'm generalizing based on the surveys and studies. They would rather not put up the hand, but if they're pushed or they're told to go there, they'll perform excellent. They will even outshine anybody. So there's a hesitation from wanting to lead. Is there
Mm.
anything that can be influenced during the school days, childhood days, that can influence this aspect? can the school play a role, or or does the home have a larger role to play?
Okay, I feel that the home, the school, they all play a very important role because the formative years of any child's life, they are critical in forming a personality of an individual. So that's one. The second, I feel that gender is a very important term which has sort of been coined to talk about anything that is regard to development. So it's a very important part of the development sector's vocabulary. And when we are talking about gender mainstreaming, I think it's extremely crucial to bring about the attitudes, the interests, the preferences, the experiences of both men and women together. Only then I feel we can really talk about the developmental agenda, wherever we are talking about. Now, gender has a history to it. I mean, it's a socio-cultural phenomena. It's a connotation which is very different from the word sex. Now, there are historical reasons, I mean, with regard to religious rights, with regard to inheritance property and differential access to knowledge. And I was also reading a very interesting part that there are around, I mean, women in rural India, they walk around 1,300 kilometers a year to fetch water, right? So that kind of a data is only coming for women, not for men, right? And of course, I mean, even if I talk about a child who is being born and brought up in a rural area, this data point really affects me in the sense, where is the education for this child? Where is this child really thinking about making certain significant changes in life? And unfortunately, in the life cycle of a girl, um, this kind of a bias stems from even before she's born. I mean, with the modern sex selection techniques which are now available, wherein female feticide is a normal reality, and we all know, in spite of the rules and regulations of the government, it is happening, to infant infanticide. And as the girl is turning into an adolescent, even in urban population, girls do report that parents are talking about marriage. पढ़ाई नहीं करोगे तो शादी कर देंगे. So that kind of a narrative evolves in children by the time they are teenagers. Dowry, marriage, I mean, there's such a part of life, and the heinous crimes that we often hear these days, um, they're all sort of getting onto the second gender that we are talking about, the females.
Yes, the challenges are obviously enormous. They're enormous, and the fact that a lot of it gets shaped during the childhood period, even before they're adults, that forms the base. That's the foundation based on which character gets formed, and then that's the kind of person you evolve to be, and probably raise families, for the next 2-3 generations. So that's the importance that childhood plays, and you're interacting with that group. So that's so the information that you share is very, very important. So Shubhra, you have worked in the corporate sector as well as the education sector. What do you think, in your view, in your experience, what do you think are the similarities or some of the stark differences, if there are any? Shubhra, could you what has been your experience?
I think the first and the foremost difference is that you find more females in teaching sector and you find more men in the corporate sector. That's one. Second, in schools, I feel you're working at the grassroots level. So your reflection of what you think, you feel, you act, it gets seen in children. And a teacher plays multiple roles. I feel that sometimes I'm a nurse, sometimes I'm a counselor, sometimes I'm a photographer, a news reporter. So the roles and responsibilities in a school as a teacher are so diverse, and one never gets the Monday blues. And
Lovely.
cooperation, yeah. And cooperation becomes the heart of whatever that you do. Even if you're planning a competition or there is an outing, I mean, you have to coordinate with all the teachers, and it has to go in synchrony, so that children can get the flavor of whatever that you're planning. Now, with corporate, I feel on the other hand, it is to do with here and now. It's about results. And competition is the core of it, even if you're working in a team. So that forms the undercurrent. That's one. The other area I feel that when people think of joining the teaching, they think of teaching as a profession. They don't really think think about the different knowledge or the different skills they might just be getting to work. They think about work-life balance. That I will be getting over from work by 2, and I think that's the motive that I sort of have in my mind. So words like career planning, succession planning, learning curve, I mean, they're very much alien to the teaching sector. Now, when I talk about corporate, it's the other way around. So if I know I'm about to join the corporate sector, I know my work-life balance will get disrupted. So I've signed up for that. I'm also aware that I'm thinking about my career, my growth, my development in all the phases by the time I'm with an organization, which I feel it doesn't happen in the teaching sector. So those are some differences that I've been able to think about.
What struck me most, Shubhra, when you spoke was the results in a corporate sector. The results have to be seen. Everybody's working towards that. And in the education sector, while, you're working towards, results, etc., the results are so different. And in almost all instances, the result is not just a board exam result. The results come out decades later. And that's why you have so many people who are great, who are probably grandparents, and then they go back and realize the gratitude that they need to have and express their gratitude towards their teachers who taught them decades ago. So the results are not so, immediate in
Absolutely.
the education sector, and you're influencing the child without even knowing that the child is getting influenced, and they're going to be grateful and thankful. There's so many lovely stories around that.
Absolutely. I so agree to you. This helps me with another example. In schools, we've often been having a dialogue that why do we have separate lines for boys and separate lines for girls? Why don't we have a mixed football team, at least at a school level? So I feel this kind of a dialogue has started, but the real change in the society will come decades later, the way you just mentioned. Where there's more acceptance and we are really talking about gender mainstreaming in a real sense, where no one particular gender is being subdued to uplift the other.
Thank you. I completely agree with that. Completely agree. Thank you for that. So with that, Shubhra, I want to, thank you for your time, for taking your time and sharing some of your advice, sharing your thoughts and views on, in that space which you're dealing with, the kind of challenges that, they're being dealt with. Thank you for taking out your time, Shubhra. Thank you for coming on the channel.
Thank you.